For this video, we're going to rig up Kusi, which is a vector-based character. And we're just going to go through step by step, add in some bones, and perhaps even work with some smart bones. So to get started, we are on the Kusi bone layer, and I want to grab the Add Bone tool and start adding some bones. So I can use A on the keyboard to select the Add Bone tool. And I'm just going to come in here and start by adding a bone for the pelvis. So just like that. You can add a traditional bone if you wish, but in this case, I like to use pin bones for the pelvis, as you can see right here. So we're just going to add 2 bones now going up to the torso. I'll hold down Shift and click and drag to move up from that point and release. And note that when I did this, I had the pelvis bone selected. So the pelvis is the starting point, and then we have the bottom bone here for the torso being connected to the pelvis. And we know that since it's red. And since this one's red, this next bone is going to be connected to the current selected bone. So just click and drag and move up. And now you have your second torso bone. With this one still selected, we're going to go up to add for the neck. And we could do, let's say, 2 bones for this. So we'll do one there, and then we have the head. And in this case, we're just going to come up and add just one for the head like so. And we could add some for the hair as well to create some physics for the hair. But we'll get to that here in a little bit. We'll just start with the basics now and then build up from there. So now we want to go back and account for the arms. We can Alt-click on the chest bone and then proceed from there. So we'll start here at near the top of this arm, click and drag and move down to about where we have the elbow, which is going to be about right there. And looking at this, I don't like the way I angled this bone, so I'm going to grab the Transform Bone tool and just come in and angle this a little bit more like so. So that way it's more in the center of the arm. Now, we can add in that second bone going down like such, and then the hand bone going out like this. Now we're going to do the same for the other arm. We'll Alt-click on the chest bone, so that way it's connected to the chest. Click and drag and move down like so to where about the elbow is, and then click and drag from here to the wrist, and then to the hand. So something like that. Then we're going to go to the legs. So starting here, and if it's easier, you might also want to come in and we could hide the body really quick just so we can get a better idea of exactly where the boundaries of the legs are. So we could start right about here, click and drag and move down to about the middle of the leg like so, and then click and drag like that. And in this case, I'm going to include the sock as part of this. So we'll move down about like that. And then we'll add the foot bone. I can just come in and add an angle like so. Alt-click on the pelvis. We'll do the same or a similar procedure for the front leg. So come in like this and like that. And then add one more like so. There we are. So now we have a basic structure set up for the character in terms of bones. Now we're just going to start applying these bones to the rig using various methods. And then from there, we can see if we need to add further bones, make corrections, and all that. So I'm going to bring back the visibility of the body just for now. And we can go to the Kusi layer, and starting at hand 1, we can begin the process of rigging. So on hand 1, this is going to make the most sense since we have just one bone to add a layer bind for this. So we're going to click on bind layer for hand 1 and then click on the hand bone. Then you go to arm 1. There are a couple things we could do, but let's go ahead and try to bind our points. So I'm going to Alt-click on this bone and we're going to lasso around. And actually, let me make sure I'm first on the bind points tool when I do this. So we'll Alt-click on the bone, lasso around like this, and we're going to choose to bind. For the top arm bone, we're going to lasso around and then choose to bind. So now if we come back here and give this a test, you can see now we have something going like this, moving along. So it does need some corrections, but at least the bones are working and the points are animating along. So let's keep going. We're going to go to the head next. Now, there are some things to keep in mind here when you are binding the head. If you bind the entire head layer using the bind layer tool here, you are then going to exclude the ability to go in and bind, for instance, hair top, nose, eyes, and head ears, because all of those will be adhering to the parent layer, which is going to be bound to the head. So if you have plans to, for instance, animate the pupils, you might not want to go in and bind the head group just to the head and, locking out all the other layers from being able to get bound to anything else. But for right now, we're just going to come in here and click on that head group and bind it to this layer. And if we feel that we need to make alterations to this, we can unbind this later and then go ahead and do more individual binding. So now we're going to go to leg 2. So here we have the second leg ready to go, and I want to bind my points once again. So we're going to start at the top this time. We'll just Alt-click to select that bone, and to make this easier, I'm actually just going to select all the points just by using Control-A, and then coming over here and binding my points. Now Alt-click on the bottom bone here, and we're just going to come in and lasso around, select anything that is past that purple bone, and then bind points. And then finally, I can click on that last bone, or Alt-click on it rather. And here we're just going to come in and try to pick out the points here that are closest to the bone, just like that, and then bind those points. So now, I can test that in a little bit, but let's just move on to the body. So here we have the body, and we're just going to do some point binding like we did before. I can start with the bottom torso bone this time, so Alt-click on that, and I'm just going to use Control-A to select all of these points, and then choose to bind points. Then we go to the second, or in this case, the chest bone, the second torso bone, and we're just going to come in here now and lasso around, just like that, to select all those points and bind those. Then right here, we have the neck bone. So I'm just going to come in here and try to lasso around just like this to select the neck and bind that. And we have the second neck bone. I'm just going to lasso those points and then bind. And then maybe any remaining little pieces that are closer to the head, we can come in here and bind those. Now we have the back leg. So coming in, Alt-click on the top bone, select everything, bind points, Alt-click on the bottom bone, select your points, bind, and then coming down here, we're just going to select the points closest to the foot, like that, and then choose to bind. Then you have the second hand. Coming in here, we can layer bind it. Then you have your arm. It's going to be very similar to how we did the first arm using point binding. So Alt-click on the top arm bone. We can bind. Come over here. We're just going to select these points like that and then bind. And then we have the hair back, which we could add some bones to, but right now we're just going to bind that to the head. So now let's come back here to the bone layer, and we're just going to give this a test to see where we are at. So if I move the head, you can see things are moving along. We have a little bend in the neck, which kind of helps given that we did add a couple bones to help with the bend of the neck. We have the arm right here. Now, it isn't quite perfect because we have to add in a smart bone to correct this bend, and we've talked about that in a separate video. But you can see here we're going to have that same issue for both arms, and a simple smart action correction can alleviate that. And then we can come over here and move our legs. And you can see here also some smart action corrections could be used to help with this, especially when we bend up like that. You can see that we have like this tapering off effect, and you can very easily correct that with some smart bones. So let's just add some smart bones really quick, just to make this a little bit more of a complete tutorial. We'll start with the legs since we're already zoomed in on them. I'm going to click once on the back leg. For this case, it'll be the calf of the back leg. B14 is the bone. And you could go in if you wanted to name this, for instance, back calf. And then we can go ahead and make a new action. Click OK. Let's go to frame 96. And we're just going to move this up like so, to the point where we feel we'll be bending at the maximum. So we don't plan to bring our leg anywhere past this point. Then we're going to come over here and locate leg 1. And just using the transform points tool as well as your curvature tool, if you feel you need it, you can come in here and just move this point to create a better looking bend. So it kind of goes up like that. Go back here to mainline, and we're going to make a second action for this leg. So come in here, make sure we have that calf selected. We're going to create a second action just like this. Go to frame 96, and we could bring this up like so, going the other way to make the correction, and go to leg 1, and you could go in here and just sort of feel this out a little bit. It's not bending all that naturally, so you could try to make a different bend with this, but we're probably going to go right about like this. And honestly, I don't really plan to ever extend this far out with the leg, so it should be okay for what we're doing here. So now if we go back here and we were to test this out, you can see it's acting a lot more naturally than it was before. We might have some issue here where we go all the way back, so you could go in here and maybe do a correction, or perhaps create a constraint so that you can only go so far before it starts to break the line work like that. But you could also at that point go ahead and make another action for a new bone. So we could name this one, for instance, back thigh, and then new action, go to frame 96. So then when this goes out like that, we just go to that leg and we try to correct the line work, just kind of like this. So you can see now when it's going like that, and maybe at about 48, we can make another little adjustment, just like that. But we just want to make sure that that line work is intact, so we can come in and just do something like that. So now if we go back to the back thigh, so now if we go back to the main line and we give this another test, let's remove these actions. You can see that's acting a little bit better now in terms of how it's performing. Now in this case, if you don't want it to go the opposite direction, you could go back here to this bone and once again create an opposite movement. So go to frame 96, bring this up to about right there, go to leg 1, come in and make your adjustments as you see fit. And perhaps also when the leg is going up this high, you don't want this line work to be right there. So we could go to the body legs and we could continue to alter that. So just move that up. So you can see now the line work is looking pretty consistent with what we're doing here. There we are. And from there, you could continue to move along with the rig and add in your smart actions so that the arms and anything else that's moving can be corrected this way. And you could also, just one more note, since we didn't do this yet, is add in some target bones. So I have no bones selected, but I'm on the bone layer. I'm just going to click once, Alt-click, click again, come in and add these targets. And this is B19 and B20. So if I click on my calf here, the back calf, go to your constraints, and we can choose here to target B19. Go to the other one and choose to target B20. So now you'll have your target bones in place. And you can see here we can go in and do different bends and all that kind of thing. Maybe even come in here and do some independent angle for the feet. So that way when we bend down, they stay stationary. And you can see here now that, of course, the front leg would need work. And we could go in and, of course, do those smart actions to apply all that and go from there. So that's a little bit about setting up a vector rig inside of Moho. Once you apply the bones, you want to go in and apply some smart bones to make sure your actions are as smooth as possible. And the goal is to test out the rig any way you feel the rig is going to be used in the production, so that way you can spot any errors or inconsistencies with the animation or design and correct them.